Well, hello and welcome to our session on secure development with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Today, I'm privileged to be joined by Ivan Razin, who is a Marketing Cloud developer at NG Group, based in Brussels. You may already be familiar with Ivan's blog at amscript.xyz, or XYZ for our US audience. Ivan's blog focuses on Marketing Cloud scripting languages, both Amscript and Serverside Javascript, for creating programmable content. And I frequently use Ivan's blog as a reference, which includes helpful procedural steps along with supporting code examples for implementing common development patterns and use cases using Marketing Cloud. Well, next, just a few words about me. My name's Elliot Harper, and I'm a Senior Marketing Technology Architect at CloudKettle. And I've been working with Salesforce Marketing Cloud for many years, in fact, since the platform was named ExactTarget. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I've written books on Marketing Cloud, including the Amscript Guide, which is a comprehensive scripting reference manual for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I've also got a vlog at mc.chat where I share tips and techniques to help Marketing Cloud users get the most out of the platform. And I also regularly post to CloudKettle's blog at cloudkettle.com/blog and also our YouTube channel at youtube.com/CloudKettle. So please make sure you check out those two other Marketing Cloud resources. Well, now that I've introduced myself, let me explain our session topic. So the term secure development broadly refers to security-aware development processes where security is built in, and therefore code is written with security in mind. And there are several different aspects of security development, and specifically implementing a Security Development Lifecycle, or SDL. Now, in this session, we'll focus on secure coding in emails and cloud pages, which are some common scenarios where security vulnerabilities can be introduced by developers, as links in these emails and on web pages are publicly accessible. So, in turn, they require additional security controls and considerations. So perhaps, Ivan, you'd like to start off by explaining some of the security aspects that developers should be considering when building emails and web pages in Marketing Cloud.
Yes. Hi, Elliot. Thanks for having me. All right. So we're going to be talking about passing the data from, for example, an email to a landing page, from a landing page to a landing page, and what are the things that you need to think about when security is involved. So first, let me present my screen and show you one of the common scenarios. When building a form, you suppose that you have to arrive to that form from a link in an email, and you have to pass some information from that link to this page. And this page, if you're not using smart capture feature and you're using a form handler technique, should pass the data that is submitted to a form handler. So basically passing the data from one page to another. To do this securely, first of all, you have to protect yourself against spamming. And the best way to do so is implementing what we call a reCAPTCHA that is created by Google, and we need to implement it first on the front end of things, like here, but also on the back end. And this is something that really needs to be done because this is like the ultimate thing that protects us from spamming. So when looking at the code and looking at the form handler page, there are three security measures that I've implemented. First of all, what we need to do is try to filter out any request that has a referrer, so the kind of origin page that has a different URL and a different protocol that you expect. So basically what I'm doing is that I'm filtering out everything that is not ExactTarget in this case. Then if this passes, I will implement the security headers that basically protect us from cross-site attacks and implement a strict origin. This is also something very useful and officially documented on Salesforce pages. But then what I'm going to do is this part of code basically takes a token that was generated by the reCAPTCHA plugin and then asks Google if the token is valid. And if this is valid, this will continue with the page and write in the data extension, send a mail. It will do whatever needs to be done. All right. So if I'm submitting this from the form, you will see this kind of result. So for the security, the referrer match, this is correct. This is what I was expecting. I was expecting the referrer to be of this domain. Then I'm looking at the reCAPTCHA token that was generated, and then I will look at the reCAPTCHA response, which was a success in this case, and then my page can do whatever it needs to be done. Then again, if I try to refresh this page, you will see that the reCAPTCHA will fail because the token is only valid once. So this is how I implement my security measures on form handler page. Or it could be another page if you pass data from one cloud page to another cloud page. All right. Next, let's discuss something about how do we pass data from an email link to a cloud page. For example, to pre-fill this cloud page with the information. For example, the first name, last name, and email address. So in order to do that, we need to pass the information in a secure way. Let me have a look. Yes, this is it. So first of all, you will see that the URL of the link has this parameter QS, which stands for query string, and it's a very long parameter. Well, the value of the parameter is very long, and it is totally encoded. So this is something that's coming from an AmpScript function, and it is natively encoding whatever information you have to pass into a query string, so it's not readable by the user. By using this function, which is called cloud pages URL, where you pass the cloud page ID and then the different pairs of key value, you'll be able to encode your information securely, and then on the form page, you will be able to just fetch it with the request parameter function. So this is something native. You don't have to do anything else other than using the cloud pages URL. Then again, this would be not enough, because basically what you are doing, you're pre-filling the form with information about the customer, which means that whoever gets hold of this link will be able to do so as well. So let's imagine a scenario where you have an email with a mirror link. So a mirror link in Marketing Cloud is basically a copy of your email put in a temporary cloud page. So whoever has access to that cloud page, if the person who reads the email accesses the mirror link, then takes the link and posts it on another website, other people will have access to this information, meaning that those people will be able to see the first name, the last name, and the email address. So in order to avoid that, we can restrict access to this page and restrict the capabilities of that link in 2 dimensions. So the first dimension would be the number of clicks that you can do. All right. So this is something that can be set up pretty easily by just creating a simple data extension and counting the number of clicks that you're doing on the link. And then what you can also implement is a time dimension, meaning that you can set up a time, for example, the time of the moment when the email was sent, add a couple of days to it, meaning that the link will only be valid for a couple of days. And how do you implement this kind of thing? You're fetching, like here in the code, the date of the actual date of today. So this is going to be the date of the send. You add a couple of days to it, and then you pass this information in the URL. In order to count the clicks, you also have to pass some sort of ID in the URL as well. In that way, on the cloud page, you can capture the ID and say, okay, that ID has been clicked once or twice or 3 times. And once this is done, on your form page, you will be able to fetch the validity date, for example, parse it and compare it to the date of now. So if the validity date is greater than the date of now, the link is valid. If not, that means that the link is more than a couple of days old. This means that we should not be pre-filling the form. As for the number of clicks, as I told you, we're going to be collecting the information about the number of clicks in a data extension. Let me just refresh it. Here, for example, I have a data extension named click counter, where I see that I have a link with that particular ID that was clicked a couple of times. So if I refresh the page now, and again, you can see that my information is no longer retrieved because the link has been clicked 3 times, and that's how you protect your data, at least for the links. Next step would be talking about storing of sensitive data in data extensions. So as you know, the data extension allows us to store any kind of data. And this kind of data is stored through an interface. It's very easy to use, and you will be tempted storing there some important information that should be protected. A lot of people are tempted to store passwords, hashes, and so on, and other information. But the thing is, the data extension can be accessed by a big number of people. Basically, in my experience, almost all the people that have access to Marketing Cloud have access to data extensions. So in order to store securely the data, first of all, you shouldn't. The short answer would be that. But if you absolutely have to, remember that if you're storing passwords, they will be visible by anyone who has access to that extension. So basically pretty much by anyone. So storing passwords without encoding them is a no-no. All right, this is not something that should be done by anyone. So if you have to store a password, you have to first hash it. All right. When hashing a password and storing in the data extension, you need to think about the different functions that are available to us in the AMP script language. And there are at least a couple of them that you should never be using. All right. So if I take AMP script guide, right, you can see that in the section of encryption and encoding functions, you have some of them. Well, actually, you have all of them. You have the easiest ones, the base64 encode decode, SHA1, 256, 512, MD5, etc. So the one you should be using to encoding data, if you want to be able to decode it, what you should use is decrypt and encrypt symmetric, and not base64. Base64 is basically something that is very, very easy to encode and decode, and you can actually find dedicated websites with tools to do it. There's also a JavaScript function that can do that for you. So encoding something with base64 is a no-go. MD5 and SHA1 are also something that you should never be using. It is not considered secure for at least 10 years now. And for SHA 256 and 512, these are the ones that you should be using if you want to encode your password in one way, meaning that these functions will only encrypt your password, but you will not be able to decrypt it. All right, and for how to use decrypt and encrypt symmetric, I think, Elliot, you have more information about that and how to use this, because even though this is one of the best ways to encode something, this is not very clear how to exactly implement it and what are the best practices to do that. All right, now, as I said, if you absolutely have to store some important information in your data extension and you don't want other people to use it, there is a way that I found through which you can actually hide a data extension. I actually created a tool just to do that, and how it works behind the scenes is pretty simple. You create a folder with Serverside Javascript. You put your data extension in that folder, and then you delete the folder. If you're trying to do this through the Marketing Cloud interface, of course, you will not be able to, because Marketing Cloud is smart enough to tell you you cannot delete a folder that contains that extension. But if you do it through code, if you do it through server-side JavaScript, you're able to do that. So let me do a quick demo here. So I'm taking this sample data extension that has one record, and I'm going to take the external key, and then I'm going to use my tool to hide the data extension. All right, now let's check back. And yeah, as you can see, the data extension is nowhere to be found. So if I try to find it, of course, I will not be able to, because it is in a folder that is no longer there. Now, what I can do with the tool as well is to restore this data extension. Now, if I check back, it is back. It's there again, and nothing basically has changed for that data extension. Next up, next topic would be how to restrict access to a cloud page. All right, this is a hard one because there is no perfect way to do that. Basically, Salesforce doesn't really have a native feature to password protect a cloud page. And sometimes, as the languages like AmpScript and server-side JavaScript allow us to basically create different tools to access data extensions, to access, I don't know, journeys, automations, etc. A lot of developers are tempted to create tools that can basically modify, view, retrieve information from Marketing Cloud. But obviously, these tools should not be publicly accessible. And in order to not make it publicly accessible, we need to protect it. So far, we've found that the best way to protect a cloud page from public access is to do an IP filtering while you are on a private network, so the VPN. There is actually a very nice article written about this. So Marcus Coates explains pretty well how to do an IP filtering, and which means that the only people that will be able to access the cloud page are the people who use the company VPN. Well, there is a problem with this method. The thing is, any IP address can be spoofed, whether it is on a VPN or not. So when implementing the solution with IP filtering, I've been told that it's better than having nothing, which means that just using the IP filtering is never enough. So the perfect solution would be to integrate a third-party solution, something like Okta or something else on the top of the IP filtering. So this means that, yeah, this article basically explains how to do that. This is fine. This will work. This will absolutely work. But the thing is, if the IP addresses mentioned here are spoofed at some point, some other people, hackers or whoever tries to get access to your page will be able to do so without any problem. I've been working to try to password protect a cloud page myself for some time now, and I also have written an article about this. But this article, even though, well, it's a proof of concept, basically describes a method that would allow access to a cloud page through a generated token that is only valid for a short period of time. But this token is kept from this token exists on a cloud page in the form of a cookie. And cookies can be basically stolen pretty easily. Recently, I saw a video on YouTube from a guy that, creates a Google Chrome extension that's sole purpose is stealing cookies from whoever uses that extension. And this video lasts about 3 minutes, so it takes about 3 minutes to steal cookies from someone. And in his example, he steals cookies and accesses Facebook account of someone else. Well, of himself in that video. Obviously, he's not doing anything legal, but this is something that is fairly easy. So my recommendations would be, if you absolutely have to create some sort of tool that you need to password protect and you want to put it on a cloud page, first of all, implement an IP filtering, then think about other methods to protect your tool, protect your cloud page. A third-party method, something that is pretty secure and approved by other companies. And my second recommendation would be, don't create any tools that can modify your system. For example, I also have an article on my blog that's talking about a tool that creates, basically allows to do a search and replace on content blocks in the content builder application. Which means that if someone gets access to this application, even though it's protected, maybe or not, this person would be able to modify all of your content blocks. So this application, I would not put it anywhere on any cloud page, just because there's a thin possibility that someone might get access to it. Now, if you have another tool that only retrieves, for example, the names of the data extensions, or I don't know, the names of the journeys, some names of the emails when the emails have been sent, something that is confidential but actually doesn't have any information about the real customers, for me, that's good enough. I mean, the goal here is, of course, not to create a breach in your system that would allow other users to actually modify your system from within. Another recommendation that I could give you about any tools that you build on cloud pages is to restrict access to this cloud page for other users. So what you can do is place your application, your cloud page on a parent business unit, then create an application in the Marketing Cloud setup and allow access to that application only through the App Exchange menu. So basically like here. Well, there's no application here for the moment, but supposedly there would be this. And then in the roles and permissions, you can actually restrict access to this particular menu. And this is it. This is all I have for today.
Well, thank you, Ivan. That's really helpful. And there's some wonderful tips in there. And I note that you've already shared a lot of this code, including that reCAPTCHA code we looked at earlier on your blog, which, interestingly enough, I saw that you showed how to use it with Vue.js, which is actually one of my new and favorite reactive JavaScript frameworks. I have some few questions for you. Maybe I'll park those to the end. But I'd now like to go and share a couple of methods that you can use to encrypt data and credentials using AmScript, which Ivan hinted at earlier. So AmScript includes two functions for encrypting and decrypting data, which have many different use cases, and I want to share a couple of common scenarios. So the first is, while Marketing Cloud includes a number of standard email reports, you may need to use the SOAP API to get additional report data that's not included in the report. Let's go and take a look at that. I'll just go and share my screen. So the send object in Marketing Cloud is one of many objects for getting job information for sent emails, but this one specifically is a really handy object as it includes aggregate report data for send jobs, including things like hard bounces and the number of invalid emails. We could have the number of errored emails. There's unique clicks and unsubscribes and much more. So while some of this data is available from system data views, where you can go and retrieve send-related data for the past 180 days or 6 months, you still need to query multiple data views. And additionally, there are many properties like the number of errored emails or invalid emails aren't included in these data views. So I'd say for scenarios where you want a visibility on additional properties, or perhaps you need to retrieve this data for sends greater than 6 months, then this sent object is very handy. So let's say that we want to go and send an email to an internal list with this data from this object in a report. So I'll create an email activity in an automation and select a list as an internal audience. That is maybe subscribers that I've created who are staff members. But as you can't use API functions in emails, I've created a Cloud Page Code resource. Let's go and take a look at this. So here it is. This is a very simple Serverside JavaScript code that uses WS Proxy. I've actually gone and borrowed or adapted this code from a post by Adam Spriggs that you can go and find by searching his blog for retrieving and storing aggregated send data, and provides the code example there. I'm using WS Proxy to retrieve the report data and then return it as a JSON object. So when I load the page, and I'll just go ahead and do that now, I'm actually using this little technique here where I'm hosting code locally. If I go and click on this link, we should see the actual data here. But this is a publicly accessible page, and I actually don't want anyone to go and see this data. So what we can do is use the AmScript Encrypt symmetric function to convert this JSON data to an AES encrypted string. So let's go and take a look at how to do that. So I'm just going to jump back into here, and it's like a cooking show. Here's one I created earlier. So I'll just go and expand my, let's go and see send report. Here we go. So I've just added some AMScript down the bottom. I'm just going to go and copy this and paste it in the page that's used by that cloud page at the moment. And so what's happening here is it's taking that JSON response data, and you can see that I'm setting it as an AMScript variable by using the set value function in Serverside Javascript. Let me just comment out writing response. And I'm using the Encrypt symmetric function. So there are several arguments required by this function, which include the string to encrypt, the algorithm used to encrypt the string, and we're using AES, a password, which I've set here as this string. Then you've got a sort value, which is an 8-byte hex string. And finally, an initialization vector value is a 16-byte hex string. So if I just go and save this, and I'll just go back to my page now, and if I go and if I just reload this page, we can see that that this encrypted string is now displayed on this page. So I can then use an email to retrieve this cloud page code resource. And on a side note, I'd recommend using a code resource page for publishing this type of content, not a landing page, as code resources pages won't count towards super message in impressions. So this is just a simple text type code resource page. So let's go and take a look at our email here. So here you can see the first thing I've gone and defined the URL to this page, and then I'm going and deflating that because cloud pages are gzipped compressed. However, you can deflate using Serverside JavaScript in this technique, which I've actually borrowed from Ivan's blog. He's documented it really well in here. We can see that we've got debug. I think if you just go and search for compress, there we go. Get JSON data from a Marketing Cloud page, where we're using accept encoding with the value of identity in the header. And so when I do so, it will go and deflate that. So if I just go back to my code, so I now use the matching password, sort, and initialization vector values with a decrypt symmetric AMScript function to decrypt this JSON data. And as WS Proxy is transforming that SOAP response envelope to JSON, I'm simply using GTL or guide template language to effortlessly parse the key value pairs for each object in the array that's returned from WS Proxy. So we scroll down here, you can see all I've done is just gone and set the source to response, and I simply go and put the key value for each object. And when that email is previewed or sent, it will iterate through all objects that are returned within the array and display that email. So let's go and take a look at this in action. So I'll just jump across to Email Studio. And here we are. So I'll just go and select Preview and Test to go and preview that email against existing subscriber record. It doesn't matter who the subscriber is. All it's doing is just making that HTTP GET request, and the code resource page is returning that JSON object. And here you can see that a guide template language is transforming that decoded JSON and displaying it on the page. So this works really exceptionally well. Now, a second example, and probably a more common use case, is to use the encrypt symmetric and decrypt symmetric functions to protect OAuth credentials on a cloud page. So while WS Proxy or API functions handle authentication for you, there may be scenarios when you need to use the Marketing Cloud REST API. And when you do so, you'll also need to create an install package to obtain the OAuth credentials. Or perhaps you want to authenticate within an external platform. In either of these scenarios, it's important to maintain confidentiality of your OAuth credentials. Now, I've seen many developers paste these hard-coded credential values into their code, And while the code is interpreted server-side and won't expose these credentials to end users, they can easily be obtained by any Marketing Cloud user who has access to Cloud Pages. For example, if we go and take a look at this link here, for example, by default, we can see that all the standard roles from the general permission set can view code from Cloud Pages. So they could simply open the page, take these credentials, and use that to access data and content from your platform, even after their user access is revoked from Marketing Cloud. However, the Encrypt symmetric function is a convenient method of encrypting these credentials. That is, you can encrypt the credentials using this function and then include the encrypted data string on the page, which can then be used by the accompanying decrypt symmetric function. But surprisingly, I've seen many users adopt an approach of using a code example from the Marketing Cloud developer documentation. Let's go and take a look at this. So if you scroll down here, I've seen this code pop up in many accounts that I've worked with. And this is a really bad idea for two reasons. Firstly, this sample code is provided for example only, and setting a string as a password and 0 values for sort and the initialization vector, obviously very guessable. But secondly, and I think more importantly, these values are displayed in the actual source code. So simply by viewing the page source in Cloud Pages, you can then use these function arguments with a decrypt symmetric function to retrieve the decrypted string without any effort. So as a result, this approach is really fundamentally flawed and doesn't provide any security of the credentials. However, as an alternative to setting the password, the sort, and initialization vector values as strings in the function arguments, you can actually create keys in key management and then pass the external values to the decrypt symmetric function. And providing that only account administrators can access the key management feature, then other users won't be able to retrieve these values. So let's go ahead and create some keys. So firstly, I'm going to go and use LastPass to go and generate a strong password. So I'll go and set my password length to something that's very strong, maybe say 25, that will do. I'm going to go and copy that string here. Under data management and key management, I'll create a new key. So I'll just give it a name, an external key, and we'll use our int_pwd, and it's symmetric, and I'll paste that value that we got for the generated password and just go and save that. So next, we need to create an 8-bit string from a generator. So I'll just, for convenience, I'll just go to this string generator site, and I want to generate a 8 random bytes hexadecimal get bytes. Thank you very much. I'll just go and take that string and paste this and just strip out the spaces. We don't need these. Replace all. So I'll take that string and go to key management again and create a new one. Let's call it integration assault, and our select salt, and external key is int_salt or whatever you want, and paste the value in there and save that. And finally, we'll do exactly the same thing, but this time we'll generate a 16 random bytes as hexadecimal. So I'll go and get the bytes here and copy this, and again, same again. I'll just go and strip out all of those space characters, and if we go back to key management, I'll click create a new one, and I'll type in integration IV, maybe int_IV. We're going to select the type as initialization vector and paste that string in here, and when I do so, just save it. And we can actually go back in and see that initialization vector displayed in uppercase that's formatted correctly. So that looks good. Now, I've already created my install package in Marketing Cloud, and I've stored the credentials in a JSON string that we see here. So we're going to be using this later with Serverside Javascript. But what I'm doing here is, rather than passing the hard-coded password and sort and string values, I'm passing the external key that I just created for my password, sort, and int values. So what I've actually done is just switched these around. You have to pass all of these arguments, but this third argument here is the external key of the password, and this fifth one here is the external key of the sort. If I wasn't using that, I would set a variable as null and put the actual string here. So this is the format that we do. I'm just going to go and copy this and paste it onto my preview page and save this. And if we jump back into Cloud Pages now, I'm just going to go and reload this page. Here we see our encrypted string of our OAuth credentials. So I'm just going to copy that. Let me just jump back to my code, and I'm just going to make a tiny change. I'm just going to paste this string here, and I'm going to change encrypt symmetric to decrypt symmetric and save this. If we jump back to the page and refresh, we can see that our credentials are decrypted, which is great. So now let's just add some additional code down the bottom here, and we'll just remove this line. We certainly don't want to output these decrypted credentials. So what this server-side JavaScript code is doing is firstly obtaining the credentials, or the decrypted credentials, from AmScript by using the variable getValue function. And then I'm using the Marketing Cloud authentication service to go and together with the auth URL, the client ID and client secret values that appear in that decrypted object, which I'm passing through this server-side JavaScript parseJSON function. So I'm just going to save this, and if we go and view the page, we can see our response that we get back from the authentication service together with our access token, and I've also obtained the REST URL too. So looking at my code, you can see that even though other users may have access to Cloud Pages, the security of my OAuth credentials is maintained and they can't be viewed. And Ivan, thanks again for sharing that great example. One question I had for you, I'm very, very curious around the hiding a data extension within a folder by removing the folder. So I assume that you're referring to deleting the category ID that's assigned to that data extension. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
So, which I understand. What I don't understand is, how were you able to restore it?
Actually using the description property of the data extension. So usually people don't put anything in the description. If they do, it's not really that important, apart from, knowing what is stored in the data extension, but usually people creating the data extension already know that information. So what I'm doing is I'm storing the current folder ID, so the category ID, in the description before I actually put the data extension in another folder and destroying that folder. So meaning that when I want to restore it, I just take the description, say, okay, this was the previous category ID. Then I restore the category ID on the data extension, and then this data extension appears in the correct folder in the contact builder.
Oh, that's very creative. Thanks for sharing that. Now, do you have any other tips that you'd like to share, or maybe questions for me?
Maybe a question for you. I noticed that you use the encryption AES in the decrypt encrypt symmetric, correct?
That's right, yes.
Yes. Is this considered one of the most secure ones? Because I know that on your website there are several ways. There are several encryption algorithms that you can use?
I've actually researched this and found that AES comes up trumps over DES or even triple DES or other flavors. So it's interesting. Marketing Cloud don't disclose what level of AES encryption they're using, but beside that, it's really regarded as the current standard, I think, for security. Well, finally, to wrap up, I'd like to thank Ivan for joining me today. I've really enjoyed this session and time together. I've learned a lot from him. And I'd really encourage you to go over to his blog, amscript.xyz or xyz, depending on where you are in the world, and subscribe to that. Also, you might want to subscribe to my vlog. Check that out at mc.chat. Head over to CloudKettle's blog, cloudkettle.com/blog, and of course our YouTube channel that I mentioned earlier, youtube.com/CloudKettle. Well, thanks again, and see you next time.